In the orbital marketplace of Xanthi 3, where fleets passed like drifting gods overhead and species from 50 worlds bartered beneath banners of light, there was a stall that most passed without seeing. It sat near the far edge of the lower bay, tucked in the shade of a rusted power conduit, manned by a woman who barely raised her eyes when others passed. Her name was Silri, and for most of her life, she believed herself to be wrong. Her species, the Yalari, were known across the systems for their radiant symmetry, their shimmering golden skin, their exotic beauty, a race sculpted, so it seemed, by the hand of starlight itself. But Silri, her skin was not gold, but a pale opal marbled with gray. Her features weren't sharp and elegant, but soft, unpronounced. Even her voice lacked the melodic cadence her kin carried like a birthright. Among her own people, she had no name that carried awe. No one whispered about her as they did about her cousins, who adorned catalogs and brokered political marriages. She was the quiet one, the forgettable one. And so she withdrew. Her stall sold hand-woven fabrics, artistry she never spoke about, patterns no scanner could replicate. She carved beauty from silence, though she never believed it lived in her. Day after day, she sat beneath the hum of passing engines and blinking signs, her eyes downcast, her lips stitched with stillness. That was where he saw her. He came in battered armor, dust still clinging to his boots. A human soldier, one of the Terran peacekeeping units deployed to monitor border trade routes. He moved with the rhythm of someone used to danger, but not used to cruelty. His name was Jack Harrow. He approached her booth without pretense, drawn more by exhaustion than curiosity. He needed something warm for the nights on patrol. His eyes scanned her works, then paused. "Did you make these?" he asked. Silri looked up, startled. Most didn't speak. Fewer still looked directly at her. "Yes," she said, voice quiet but clear. "They're incredible," he said, gently lifting a scarf. "You've got an eye." She looked at him for a second too long, confused. He didn't glance away. No pity, no flattery, just a truth she wasn't used to hearing. "Incredible," he repeated, and then he smiled. Silri said nothing. She only handed him the scarf. But her hands trembled. He returned 2 days later. Not in uniform this time, civilian wear, simple and dust-streaked. He had no excuse ready, only a small grin and a few coins in his palm. "Thought I'd see what else you've got," he said. Silri blinked, then nodded. She didn't know what to say to men who smiled without mockery. It was unfamiliar, disarming. Her instincts told her to retreat behind politeness, but something in his voice pulled her closer to the moment. He picked up another piece, this time a longer wrap, deep red with silver embroidery. "This reminds me of home," he said. "We don't have cloth like this. Everything's synthetic now. But my mother used to hand-stitch things like this." Silri didn't speak. Her eyes rested on his face. Rugged, yes, a soldier's face, marked by sun and scars. But his gaze was soft, and it wasn't trained on her awkwardly. He looked at her the way people looked at something worth knowing. He caught her staring. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then said, "Silri." He smiled again. "Jack." She nodded, then looked down as if the moment were too bright to stare into directly. Jack stepped back, turned the wrap in his hands. "You ever think about displaying these in the upper tier?" "No," she said too quickly. "They wouldn't sell." "Why not?" "Too plain," she murmured. "Not bright enough, not enough." Jack tilted his head. "Silri, this is the most honest craftsmanship I've seen up here. And the detail?" He held it up. "It's beautiful." She froze. The word echoed in her like a dropped glass in a cathedral. Beautiful. No one had ever called her that. Not her work. Not her hands. And certainly, never her. Jack didn't realize what he'd said. He was already folding the wrap, counting out credits, but she stood behind the stall, heart thudding in her chest, mouth slightly open. She had no language for what had just happened, only the feeling that something inside her, quiet and buried for too long, had begun to stir. The next morning, Silri arrived at her stall earlier than usual. The lights above the docking ring were still dim, the market floor still quiet, but she moved with uncharacteristic purpose. Her hands unpacked the fabrics she had made in secret, pieces too subtle, too strange, too personal. She had never dared to display them before. The colors were muted, shades of drifting nebulae, the soft silver blue of shadowed moons, the charcoal swirl of storm clouds above the sands of Arundel. Patterns that had no symmetry, no repetition, only rhythm. They were not what her kin considered beautiful. But Jack had looked at her work, and his eyes had said otherwise. She laid them out one by one, uncertain, her breath tight with doubt. She nearly gathered them again. But before she could, the footfalls came. Heavy, confident. Military boots. He returned. Jack approached her stall the way he had the first time, relaxed and curious, but when he saw the new fabrics displayed, he stopped. His hand reached out, slowly. "This one," he murmured. "It looks like wind in a canyon. Like it's moving." She nodded, the corners of her mouth twitching up before she could stop them. He smiled. "I'm glad you put these out." Silri looked away, embarrassed. "They're not conventional." Jack tilted his head. "Conventional is what they make when they can't imagine something better." His words weren't poetry, but they struck deeper than any verse. He lingered at the stall, this time asking questions, not just about the fabrics, but about her. Her people, her craft, her home. She answered in pieces, her voice unsure, but he never interrupted. He listened like someone who wanted to know. And then came the question she hadn't prepared for. "Why do you stay down here?" he asked gently. "You could be on the upper tier." She hesitated. "Then, they don't want me there." "Because of the way you look." She didn't reply. Jack's brow furrowed. "Silri, you're stunning." She didn't move. The air between them went still. Not silent. Still, like the moment before a storm breaks or a string is plucked for the first time. Silri's chest rose, then stilled. Her fingers trembled where they touched the edge of the fabric. No one had said that to her before. Not once. And not with that kind of certainty. "I'm not," she whispered, eyes cast low. "You don't have to say that." He leaned closer. "I didn't say it because I had to. I said it because it's true." And she looked up at him, afraid and astonished, as if he had spoken a language she didn't know she understood. That night, Silri stood in front of the mirror in her small quarters, staring at the face she had learned to avoid. The light in the room was soft, flickering gently from a mounted lantern. Her reflection shimmered slightly in the polished metal. For the first time, she didn't look away. Jack's words circled in her mind, looping like an old melody she didn't know how to silence. "You're stunning." The part of her that had been carved hollow by years of absence, of praise, of touch, of being seen, shook against the weight of it. She ran her fingers over the curve of her own jaw, the subtle contours of her cheekbones. Her skin had always been too pale, too soft for her kind, her voice too quiet, her posture too closed. But now there was a man who had seen her, and hadn't flinched, hadn't looked through her. He had looked at her, and she wasn't sure what to do with that. The next day, when she returned to the market, the change in her was small, but real. She didn't hide behind her stall. She adjusted her scarf, let the light catch the softer tones in her skin. She stood with her back straight. When Jack arrived, he noticed it instantly. "Morning," he setting down a satchel. "Morning," she replied, and this time her voice didn't falter. He grinned. "New piece?" She nodded. "I made it last night." He picked it up carefully, silver threads woven through deep cobalt like starlight tangled in midnight. He held it up against the sun filtering through the market's dome. "It's like the night sky on Europa." "You've been there?" "Once. Cold. Beautiful. Like you." Her heart clenched. He kept doing that, saying things without hesitation, without seeing the lines she had drawn around herself. And every time, he redrew her. She took a breath, then another, and finally asked, "Why do you say such things?" He looked at her, surprised. "Because they're true. And because I think you've waited too long to hear them." Silri said nothing, but she stepped from behind the counter for the first time, and stood beside him, close enough to hear her own breath, and feel the gravity of someone who saw more than fabric, someone who saw her. They began walking the markets together, slowly. At first, it was just during slow hours, Jack passing by after patrol, Silri closing up her stall. He would offer to carry her crates, or distract a loud merchant while she slipped by unseen. Then, one day, she surprised him by walking beside him through the upper-tier promenade, where light was brighter, people louder, and eyes more judgmental. No one had ever walked with her there. Not like that. They passed vendors and officers, travelers and traders. Some looked at her with curiosity, some with subtle disdain, but none of them mattered. Not when she heard Jack's voice beside her, warm and unwavering. He was telling her about his home, New Colorado Colony, how it snowed twice a year, how the sun set violet behind the ridge, and how his mother sang while building glider ships in the yard. And when it snowed, she'd make us eat it like it was a delicacy, he said, chuckling. Swore it tasted like heaven. I was too young to argue. Silri tilted her head, her eyes distant. I've never seen snow. You'd like it. Soft, quiet, doesn't need to be perfect to be beautiful. He glanced at her. She said nothing, but her lips curved, slowly, shyly, into a smile. It wasn't planned. She hadn't meant to. But the laugh came anyway, a gentle sound pulled from somewhere forgotten. It slipped through her before she could catch it, surprised her even more than it did him. Jack blinked, then grinned. That's the first time I've heard you laugh. Silri flushed. I wasn't trying to. Maybe that's what made it so good. She looked away, trying to tame the heat in her cheeks, but something in her chest fluttered uncontrollably, an emotion she didn't have words for. Not in Yalari, not in Terran, just something unfamiliar, but good. And when they passed a reflective window, she caught her image again. She didn't look like anyone else, but for the first time in her life, she didn't want to. A few nights later, the station dimmed its lights in honor of the Stellar Alignment Festival. The halls turned gold and deep violet, long silks flowing from the ceiling like suspended auroras. Everyone wore their finest, gathering at the central dome for dancing, music, and to watch the twin moons pass behind the comet-lighted sky. Silri didn't plan on attending. She stood in her room, half-dressed, unsure why she'd even let herself consider it. Her hands trembled as she ran them along the length of the garment she'd woven for herself. A soft, deep indigo robe with star-thread inlays. It shimmered like a breath held between night and light. Too much, she thought. Too hopeful. A knock pulled her out of the spiral. When the door slid open, Jack stood there, his jacket formal, but crooked at the collar. His hair was still damp from a hurried shower, and a faint scar above his brow caught the light like an accent. He held something behind his back. You're late, he teased. I didn't say I was going. I brought you something in case you changed your mind. He revealed a small glass pin, silver with a deep green gem at the center. It matches your eyes, he said. Silri blinked. You noticed? I always do. She took the pin, her fingers brushing his. He didn't move. Then softly, barely more than a breath, she asked, why do you keep doing this? Doing what? Looking at me like I'm beautiful? He finished. Her chest tightened. I'm not. I never have been. He stepped closer, no hesitation in his voice. Silri, I've looked at warriors, ambassadors, stars, and sunsets in cities that cost empires to build. He reached out, touched her cheek, and I've never seen anything that quieted me like you do. The silence that followed was thick, full, alive. She didn't cry, but she almost did, because in all her life she'd been invisible in the eyes of her people. And now a human, one rough around the edges, calloused from war, was telling her she didn't need to shine like anyone else. She was radiant in her own way. They went to the festival together, and when they walked through the golden light, the people stared, not at how strange she was, but at how Jack looked at her, and at how she, finally, looked back. The station's central dome gleamed under comet light, and Silri walked through it like she belonged, because she did. Jack offered his arm, and she took it. Her fingers delicate against the fabric of his jacket, her step slow but steady. Around them, laughter bloomed, music swelled from the curved orchestra pit, and the kaleidoscope of alien and human faces mingled like brushstrokes on a single canvas. But even amid that beauty, he kept looking at her. Others noticed too. Some glanced with curiosity, some with quiet disapproval. It didn't matter. Silri could feel their eyes, but for once, they didn't weigh her down. Because Jack's gaze wasn't distracted or diplomatic. It was unflinching and warm, grounding her like gravity. He watched her with admiration so transparent it made everything else irrelevant. I shouldn't be here, she whispered as they reached the upper terrace. You absolutely should, he said. You were meant to. She shook her head faintly, eyes drawn to the sky visible through the dome's crystalline ceiling. There are so many others, better suited, more graceful, more... Stop. His voice was quiet but firm. Don't name the people you've spent your life comparing yourself to. You'll only ever chase shadows. He turned toward her fully. You're not the brightest light in the room because you're loud or painted or chosen. You're the brightest because you don't need to be anything else. She didn't speak, but her hands tightened around his forearm. And when the music changed and the floor below began to fill with dancers, he didn't ask. He just led her down the marble steps, one slow movement at a time. She followed him onto the floor, unsure, barely breathing. And when he pulled her close, she forgot the posture they taught on Arundel. She forgot how to lower her eyes or make herself small, because there was nowhere to hide in his arms. And more importantly, for the first time, she didn't want to. They danced in slow turns beneath the sweeping lights of passing stars. Her head rested against his chest, and the music blurred into the sound of his heartbeat. Familiar, steady, real. That night, she didn't return to her quarters alone. She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing beside her, his hand resting gently in hers. The word beautiful no longer felt distant. It felt lived. The illusion broke the next day. News came from command. Jack was being redeployed, transferred to a deeper sector along the edge of the Varnak expanse, where conflict still smoldered beneath the treaties. Silri stood in silence as he told her, his expression unreadable, voice slow, like he was afraid the words might shatter her. 2 weeks, he said. I thought I'd have more time. You're leaving. Her voice was even, but her body betrayed her. Her arms folded, her shoulders drew tight. It's not forever. Just... War never gives anything back, Jack, she said softly. You may leave for a year, or you may leave and never return. We both know that. He looked at her. I didn't come to this station expecting anything, but I found you. She turned away, afraid he'd see the tremble in her hands. I don't want to be something you remember when you're dying in a trench. You won't be, he said, because I'm not going to forget you. Not ever. Silri faced him again, and this time, she didn't hide the tears in her eyes. I waited years for someone to see me, just once, and now that someone has, he's vanishing into the stars. Jack reached out, took her hand. I'm not vanishing. I'm fighting to make a galaxy worth returning to. She blinked slowly, then said with quiet resolve, Then don't die in it. He smiled, a little broken. Not if I know you're waiting. They stood there, not speaking, until the silence became their shelter. The farewell wasn't sealed with grand promises or dramatic declarations. Just 2 hands clasped tightly, 2 souls uncertain of the future, but completely sure of one thing, that she was no longer invisible, and that wherever he was going, she had already become his reason for surviving. 3 months passed. The market continued to spin in its familiar cycle. Ships came and left, soldiers rotated, banners changed. But for Silri, each day felt quieter than the last. She returned to her stall, her hands weaving again, but her colors had changed. No longer muted. Now they shimmered with deep greens and burning coppers, threads of gold sewn into midnight blue. She didn't think much as she worked. Her fingers followed the rhythm her heart remembered. Jack's voice echoed in her mind often. His words still lit up her silence. His name was no longer just a name. It had become the axis of her days. Every time the comm station blinked, every time a freighter arrived, her chest would tighten with hope. Then one evening, as the dome outside turned amber under the flare of a passing sun, she received a transmission. It came encrypted, carrying a Terran military seal. Her hands trembled as she teed it open. The voice that followed wasn't Jack's. This is Command. We regret to inform you that Sergeant Jack Harrow was critically injured during a border conflict near the Varnak expanse. Evacuation was delayed due to hostile interference. He is in intensive recovery aboard the TSN Elias. He requested that we contact you personally. Silri's throat closed. He's stable, but he can't speak. He suffered internal damage. There was a note, dictated days before the mission. I've attached it. Her hands hovered above the file like it might burn her. Then she opened it. It was short, unsteady. A voice recorded in quiet pain. I don't know if I'll make it, Silri, but if I don't, I need you to know that I never left your side. Not really. You're the most beautiful part of the life I got to live. If I wake up again, I hope I see your face first. That night, she didn't sleep. She wove instead. Every thread held his name, and every stitch whispered the truth she hadn't said aloud. That she loved him. The station hangar roared with the sound of engines when the TSN Elias docked 3 weeks later. Silri stood at the edge of the arrival bay in a robe she had made herself, woven with the same silver blue he once said reminded him of Europa skies. The hatch opened slowly. Medtechs disembarked first. Then, the hoverbed came next. And Jack, thinner now, pale, scars stretching across his cheek, lay on it with his eyes closed, still and quiet. Silvery walked to him, the sound of her steps drowned by the ambient clamor of the crowd. When she reached his side, she didn't speak. She simply touched his hand. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. His gaze, unfocused at first, drifted across the ceiling until it landed on her, and didn't move. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "You said you hoped to see me first." He smiled, cracked and dry. "I always see you first." She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for months. Then she took his hand and placed it on her chest. "Do you know what I've become because of you?" He blinked slowly. She leaned closer. "I stopped hiding." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. "You told me I was beautiful, and I didn't believe you. But now, I don't care if anyone else ever sees it." She touched her lips to his fingers. "Because I believe you." His hand curled slowly into hers. The monitors around him hummed gently, and for the first time in either of their lives, nothing about love had to be shouted, proven, or explained. It had been seen, named, and returned.